So welcome everyone and welcome Colin. It is extraordinary to have you here, and can you start with introducing yourself?
Hi Sigrid, thank you very much for having me on. That was a very useful little meditation time out there. I'm not really habitually a meditator, but I do occasionally sometimes. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later. I have my own instant coffee version. Yeah, my name is Colin Turner, or Colin R. Turner, as somebody is generally kind of known on the internet. I write books, and I'm an activist, and I write mostly about the ideas of a moneyless society, or post-scarcity and abundant society. It technically is called an open access economy. There's lots of information about that. People could also look about a resource-based economy. And really what it is it's the idea of that we share the world, and that we just do away with the market system, which has caused so many problems that we can discuss if you like. And we can actually evolve beyond that into a society where we're more responsible, where we're proper custodians of the planet, where we are governed by compassion and by empathy, and really by looking out for each other more than we do now. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that our society now is highly individualistic, materialistic, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out that once you expand that out, that this can't end well. You know, we can't have we've already seen all the wealth being hoarded into different pockets of society, and so that's obviously how that must play out. So we have to, obviously we have the climate crisis and other social inequality issues that are serious. And my job really is to try and open up people's eyes to alternative possibilities, to say, well, maybe we don't need to use this market system. Maybe we don't need to trade or use money at all. Maybe this is not the only way to do things. And that's really the focus mostly of my work, and that's kept me busy in the last maybe 8 years or so. I started an initiative called the Free World Charter in 2010. And that we have a lot of people who have endorsed that charter. Several, like 60,000 people or thereabouts, who have endorsed this. These are like 10 alternative principles to operating a more compassionate and realistic society. From that, then I've written some books. I wrote a book called Into the Open Economy, which is free to download. And this is it encapsulates the idea of how a moneyless society could work and how it could get there. I also wrote a novel, which is about how it's like a fictional account of how such a world would come about. And I actually have some people talking to me about potentially making a movie from that, which is exciting. So, long story short, I'm a very busy guy. I've been doing this pretty much full time for the last 7 or 8 years, and it's been really, really successful. Lots of people are so tuned into the problems of the world and knowing that we can't continue the way that we're going. That infinite growth on a finite planet is obviously not something that's just going to happen. So we have to start thinking about things differently. And I suppose really the reason I'm here and the reason I'm on your show is because that what we're talking about here is a spiritual awakening of sorts, a global awakening, where people are, for want of a better word, are coming out of sleep, and they've been sort of drugged into this kind of materialistic, individualistic lifestyle, which really sprang from, say, the World War II, where we had this terrible recession, and the advent of television, where they started creating this consumer culture. That's really where I would finger the sort of ground zero for the consumer culture, is really the rise of television combined with recession. And obviously, because we realized how easy it was to sell things and to convey ideas through TV and propaganda, that this whole sort of thought control machine, for want of a better word, has been happening, and which kind of lulled people into a completely false reality where they think that happiness is a designer dress, or it's a sports car, or it's a big house. But of course, anyone who's awakened knows that happiness is none of these things. It's happiness well, for me, it's a decision. It's how you decide to be, and it's a constant. It's a way of life, really. It's not a destination. But of course, our advertising, the people who administer advertising and who sort of prescribe the message for the masses, really, they've created this illusion of like a game that you have to start at the beginning and you have to work your way through something, and then you'll get the prize, and then you work more, you get another prize. This is completely false reality. We have to awaken people to the idea that actually we all deserve to have happy, fulfilled lives right now, today. And of course, we deserve to have all the access to all the basic necessities of life, water, food, shelter, clothing, communications. I mean, all these things, it's almost bizarre to even be saying this, that you have to, all these things for life are actually behind a paywall. You're not entitled to food, you're not entitled to water, you're not entitled to a house. All these things are, you have to pay for these things. And that is absolutely absurd. In the 21st century, it's just ridiculous. And in 50, 100 years' time, that will just seem absolutely primitive, So my job really is to try and awaken people from this slumber and try and convey new ideas. And, well, it's going very well. It's challenging at times, but it's going very well. So I'm quite happy with things as they are.
So how would you, because listening to this, many people are, even the awakened people, right, are not used to this concept. Because if you talk about money, people start to cringe, right? What if they touch my money? What if there's not enough? So we get into the scarcity, abundance instantly. So what would you share about that?
Well, you have to remember that we're all being programmed really quite effectively to believe that money equals survival. That the one is absolutely equal to the other, because literally it's true. Because if you don't have food, or if you don't have money, you won't have food, you might not have access to clean water, you may not have shelter and warmth, etc. So you do have to have money to survive in this world. So this is why then when you say to people, well, look, let's have a world without money, and instantly they think, well, that means I'm going to be poor, I'm not going to have anything, and this is obviously not going to work. And then you have this whole sort of, there's like another hidden program of people scared of the idea of communism. That's this kind of thing that was really being driven hard into people. They can say, well, that's going to sound like communism. This is like an evil thing. But of course, I mean, it's just ridiculous idea. Some of our aspects of communism are a fantastic idea, and we celebrate them when we call them something else, but when you use the word communism, it sounds, scary. But then if you talk about, well, let's share goods and services, people say, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. This is communism, it's the same thing. And one of the most important things that I've learned actually in my journey over the last few years is how important those words are, the words that you choose to use. Because words are really powerful symbols and they're tokens, So if you suggest one word like communism, for example, it immediately opens up a big picture in people's minds of something that's maybe bad or good. Or fascism, for example, you say these things, and again, people have flash images or something like that straight away. So it's part of my job, and especially being a writer, is to try and avoid some words a little bit like a minefield. You step on some words, and you have to be careful which words you use, because at the end of the day, I want to try and convey a reasonable idea without sort of distractions of people thinking that I'm trying to talk about something else. So. Yes, most people, they equate money with survival, and that's perfectly reasonable in this day and age. The only way a money-less society can work really is when large groups of people agree to operate that way. And that really means that we create a new social contract which involves sharing, cooperation, volunteering, sharing our knowledge with each other, and upskilling ourselves to become more self-sufficient, to grow our own food and all these things. I mean, gosh, it's such a big topic here, so I'm trying to cover so many things. Yeah, I mean, and one of the other problems is how we've been programmed. We've been programmed to be highly reliant on outside agencies like government and companies and providers, food suppliers, and people who do jobs for us. You know, we're so utterly reliant, even though we may think we're independent with our big fat wallet or something like that. But actually, we rely on so many people that it's difficult sometimes to try and convince people that we have to be more self-sufficient, because this is it's the ultimate. How shall I say? It's the ultimate fulfillment, I think, is to actually provide for yourself, to actually to literally grow your own food in your garden and cook your own food, and go through all that process. I think it's a very visceral and very necessary process for us as animals. You know, we are animals, and that sense of providing for ourselves and procuring our own food and providing for ourselves is a very, very important thing for us, because it keeps us connected to the things that sustain us, you know. And at the moment, we're not connected at all to the things that sustain us, you know. Food comes from a supermarket, you know, water comes from a tap, and, you know, everything is kind of provided for us. So, yeah, the moneyless society really can work when we adopt this different kind of social contract where we agree not only to look after ourselves as much as we can better, but also to create a sort of in our local communities, create sort of supportive communities that actually will provide goods and services within the area. And this is something that we're working on at the moment. We're creating a website called Free Worlder, which is basically a map-based website where people are sharing goods and services and knowledge. Now that's already happening. Now that site is something we're working on now. So yeah, there's a lot of things to discuss about that.
I'm actually curious. What comes up in my mind is, for example, okay, so I'm doing this work I do now, which is actually a free event, which is good because it doesn't really matter for me, because doing the work, like creating this, is what basically creates the fulfillment, and the abundance flows not only in me doing this, but there is like in life some kind of normal balance, right? It comes back in the varieties of ways. Maybe not in the way I'm giving to you, for example, but it comes back in other ways. So what for the people thinking, yeah, but I don't want to grow my own food, or I'm a really good nurse, or I'm very good at, so how, what would you say? Because that's interesting, right? How can I still be doing what I love and also have the money-free?
Yeah, well, this is one of the underpinning ideas of the open access economy that I was telling you about earlier, is moving away from the idea of explicit trade, which is I do something for you and you do, and therefore you do something for me of equal value, and we agree to that, and then no one else is involved. Or implicit trade, which is what you're talking about, where it's kind of like pay it forward, rather than I do something for you and then you do something for someone else and they do something for someone else, and it goes around in a big circle. Obviously, that can't work unless there's like a sufficient number of people. I don't know exactly what the numbers required for it, but you have to have like what's called redundancy, where if I want you to do something, but you can't do it, but there has to be someone else who can do it. I don't know if I'm describing that well. It's like you have to have fail-safes. There has to be enough people in there so there are fail-safes, so someone else can take over if someone can't. And within this, that's basically like a circular economy where basically we're all doing things for each other. And once you have enough people doing that, then we can reach a critical mass where actually, well, hang on, this little community we created is actually entirely self-sustaining. So yeah, exactly right. So maybe some person is much more gifted at growing and cooking, and another person might be good as being a nurse or musician or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. Though we need to say that let's move away from this idea of explicit trade. I do something for you, you do something for me. Let's move to an implicit trade where we all kind of basically do things for each other. And when we all do that, of course, we're getting things done for us as well at the same time.
Because this whole show is also about, or retreat is also about activating your divine essence. And I'm actually thinking, because when I quit my day job and stepped into doing what I really desired, which is this, and actually teaching people to be more in nature in order to leave their phone and all the crazy stuff out and start. So it's actually like I'm teaching them now again to go back, but then not from this perspective you showed, but I'm imagining that with the world awakening, like if you would have done this like 300 years ago, it's different, right? But now we have all these people awakening to who they truly are, wanting to like do something on this earth. Now it's probably different as well, am I right? From, for example, 300 or 500 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Obviously, the technology has advanced hugely, and I really think that we're not using it in a good way. You know, we've used technology. Well, obviously we use technology to make things easier. So it's very easy to build big hospitals now, for example, with machines that can do that now, which would be unthinkable years ago. You know, so we have this amazing technological power, but we're not really using it to actually leverage the essence of being human, of being fulfilled and being happy. And we've really lost that message. And I think, as I said to you earlier, I think that the connection with the land that we all had unavoidably some 100 years ago, I think it was very important because it connects with us on an animal level, and it gives us that sort of that fulfillment in a very, very underlying way. And I think that the problems that the reason for you're doing your job, you're helping people to reawaken or to helping people to find their inner essence. I mean, is because we're detached. We've become detached from ourselves and very compartmentalized. You know, like so somebody is a doctor, for example, and we summarize that person, say that person is a doctor, and so we have we have labels and compartments for everything. Everything is separate. You know, this idea of like the Newtonian worldview, where basically everything has a name, everything is compartmentalized, everything is described, and everything is separate. You know, the universe is a bunch of separate particles, basically. And I think, obviously, that's not the case. And I'm sure you probably agree as well, that everything is really unified. And we've lost that unification of ourselves through the misuse of advertising, through the consumerism and the whole individualistic culture. It's pulled us away from that. And I think the technology has been useful for that. It's been useful for us, but it's also been used against us in that way. Like, for example, television is a fantastic technological advancement, but of course it's been used to make us behave in ridiculous ways, to be honest. I was actually thinking there this morning, I don't know why, I was just like, I had a thought out of my head of nothing. I was lying in bed and I was thinking about the Jerry Springer show in the 1990s. And I was nearly going to make a meme about it, saying we should have known when we saw the Jerry Springer show that we were in trouble, because when you saw the sort of things that were going on in that show, the way people were behaving, and then the way people decided to make a TV show out of that, and then the way people were watching that TV show, it kind of I don't know. I thought it was just a random thought, but it sums up to me what a ridiculously diverse journey we've been on. You know, that we've completely lost our sense of meaning. And it's just, well, it's good. It's giving you a job, I suppose.
Yeah, it does. And I was actually, when you were talking, we are actually, my son is 10, my oldest of 4 is 10. And we're like, if we allow him space, he wants to watch YouTube, like the most horrific, I think, like things. And we always say, don't clutter your mind, right? You're not allowed of us, because there's so much good stuff available to us, right?
Yeah.
All teaching, all the free stuff, all this kind of stuff, like very good stuff. And then there's this other part, which is like, you don't want to go there because it's just not giving you, it doesn't grow you as a person. So, because you have these principles, right? So if someone is listening and is interesting, so what principles can you start off with in your own life, for example, me, mother of 4, like running a business and doing all these things. How can I start in a way? I mean, I'm always already giving away stuff because I prefer that above selling, right? So that's one probably. But what would be the first baby steps?
Mm-hmm. No, well, I think baby steps is exactly the good way. It's actually the good way to put it, because a lot of people think when you say moneyless society, you say, okay, let's build this, let's make this happen, and let's like flick it like a switch and it's going to happen. Well, it's not going to happen like that. And the reason I know that is because the culture and the capitalist society that we live in, that didn't happen overnight either. This happened gradually over hundreds of years' time. You know, I mean, in the medieval times in England, there's quite an interesting story. Is that you had all these landowners basically who owned like big large chunks of England basically, or Great Britain at the time, and everyone who lived on their land was basically a subject of the landlord. You know, that's where the word landlord comes from. And so basically your landlord owned everything that you did, more or less, and he allowed you to live there. That sort of stuff. And what happened was that all these serfs or peasants, basically, they used to congregate in secret and start trading with each other away from the landlord's gaze. And really what that was actually, that was the beginnings of free market trading, where basically people say, well, I don't have to give all my stuff to my landlord. I'm going to start free trading with whoever I want to trade with. And so obviously that was a great idea at the time, you know, this free market trading. So of course you can trade with whoever you want. But now we've reached the absolute apex of that system. Well, we probably reached the apex of it maybe 40 or 50 years ago, maybe, and where actually now it's becoming hugely detrimental. We obviously see this ridiculous idea of economic growth and jobs all the time, growth and jobs, which is literally chewing up the planet that we live on. So that's a ridiculous state of affairs. So the only way to really to change it is to start reversing that down, and that's almost means becoming like an anti-economy, an anti-growth economy, where basically we start buying less, we start engaging less with the things that are polluting the planet, like we're flying less, for example. Stop polluting. Don't pollute the planet as much in any way we can. Don't buy wasteful things or things that are irresponsibly produced. I mean, it's little baby steps like that, and then of course, what you're doing is and what I'm doing is share your goods and services for free as much as you can. You know, obviously, we all still have to do what we can. You have to be practical about it. So if you're giving too much, that's a really bad idea. You know, I don't recommend people do that. You have to give and take, and you have to work within the system that we have. So exactly. So we have to just taper off this capitalist system gradually. And the good news is, I think, is that the more we sort of taper off that system, where we're kind of reducing the individualistic dependency on other agencies, is that we're going to start finding ourselves again, and we're going to start coming together as a community again. I mean, I don't know if, I'm sure you're probably a similar age to me, Sigrid, but I remember when I was a boy or growing up, that our neighborhoods were much, much more connected than they were now. You know, everyone knew each other, and people stopped and talked, and there was just, you know, there was a general stronger sense of community with people, and people helped out. No one ever asked for money. You know, somebody wanted to mind your kids, you just took your kids over there, and that sort of stuff. Nowadays, almost people wouldn't consider doing that whatsoever, certainly not with a stranger. So you can say that the whole technology has really, even though it's trying to connect people, it's actually disconnecting people as well. I mean, what do you say if you have like a thing like Facebook, for example, that's trying to connect everyone in the world, and yet everyone is sitting in their homes on Facebook, not being out in the world? I don't really know what the answer to that one is, but it certainly doesn't look healthy. So what I think is that in terms of the finding ourselves, reconnecting with our true purpose, reconnecting with what makes us feel full, and that's really what we want. We want to feel full and happy and joyous in our lives, and everyone deserves to feel like that. So, but unfortunately, we're derailed from that because we're trying to think of what's going to get me the most money, what's going to give me the most financial security for the future. So it's really coming back to this anti-economy is really like trying to give and share more with other people. The Free Worlder site, for example, is maybe a good place for people to start. Like I've offered and received lots of goods and services there. It's quite a small site, it's a growing site, but it's quite a committed bunch of people. And one of the things that I've observed really in trying to bring about this kind of moneyless way of thinking is that it's not easy. It's not really super intuitive. You kind of have to work at it. It's like walking through toffee a little bit. You have to kind of force it, make it happen. For example, I do graphic design, for example, and I've done lots of graphic design projects through the Free Worlder thing. I put an ad there that say people want me to design a logo or something like that. So I put an ad on there and I do these things. And then at the same time, I'm always kind of thinking, well, normally I would charge 150 euros or something like that, and it kind of is nagging there a bit. So you kind of have to, there's a little bit of wrenching goes on. So requires some discipline, I guess, yeah, and it requires people who are committed. But we're hoping to relaunch that site soon, actually, with a much more modern, newer look. So.
And is it also because what I'm also teaching actually is people saying yes to their desires as well, right? Because it's not only about giving, because otherwise you get this disbalance. So not the desires as in I need to have the biggest villa because but the heart's desires, I'm calling it, right? So if you say yes to this, you always usually go through the money barrier, right? Because you want to have this coach or you want to step into this kind of business, and it's kind of, and now there's still money involved, but I think the practice is kind of similar because you say yes to something and you don't have the security of the money where we kind of think it is secure yet. And I feel that stepping in a way of living this way might also already be the first step, in the sense of you don't allow money, the false security, to dictate your life because you step in full. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is why I think it's very important that that people are aware of what's the best word? That their expectations are not too high, for example, to be working on a sort of a pure giving and sharing network. Because on the Free Worlder site now, for example, I said it's a young site, it's starting off, and a lot of the things that people are offering and sharing there are really quite trivial, small items, or people who are doing very small services. I think there's one lady who's proofreading up to 2,000 words, something like that, this kind of thing. So it's kind of small things like that. And I think my idea for that site is that even though we have small things, is that if we build on that we can eventually increase confidence in that level, increase the confidence level, where basically, well, actually, hang on, I'm benefiting from this here myself. So maybe I'll give a little bit more next time, and then maybe you'll benefit a bit more and you give a bit more. So it has to be like that sort of, baby steps is a good way of saying it. It has to be like building and building on where we go. Now, obviously, like I say, at the moment, we have very trivial, small items available on that. But eventually, there's no reason why we can't have higher value items when you have, for example, if you have 1 million people using this site, it's inevitable you're going to have much higher value, much more diverse range of things available on that site. So that's the only thing, yeah, I would say, is don't expect too much. But yeah, as you say, once you start stepping into that mindset, even, it starts altering your behavior as well, so maybe if I would recommend people to read the Open Economy book, that the one I was telling you about, or that might be a good start, because it kind of gives really really simple basic ideas for how you can kind of start in that thinking differently, how you can start approaching that sort of mentality in another way. So yeah, it's
So yeah, before we stop, I really loved one thing, so I want you to go into that a little bit more. You call them, because there was this question, I obviously watched another interview, and then they asked but what about the shitty jobs, right? What about the jobs no one wants to do? Yeah. And I love the answer, because I think it's really true. You talked about service days.
Yep.
Can you go into that? Because I think this changes perspective, right? It just shifts your perspective.
Yeah, that's in the book as well. We have a thing. We have a thing in modern society now that we call it community service. And that can mean one of two things. It can mean basically where you're helping out in your local housing estate, picking up litter or cleaning up the local beach. Or it can also mean prisoners who are basically let out for a day to go and paint benches or to chop trees or something like that. This kind of things. But this structure of community service, or this idea of community service, is exactly how we can operate society on a basic level. Well, like I say, with the jobs that people don't want to do. If you say that, okay, let's have a moneyless society, right, for tomorrow, okay? Well, let's say, but will you work like 10 hours a month, for example, in your local area, whatever, cutting grass or sweeping the road or painting a building or something like that? Maybe it'd be 10 hours, maybe it'll be 30 hours a month or something like that. Whatever, depending on the area, obviously you could do that. I mean, most people really that I know, and certainly myself, would have no problem agreeing with something like that, That, okay, well, it means I don't have to have a job, I can have everything I want. All I have to do is I have to contribute a little bit back into the society. And of course, it doesn't have to either be a shitty job. It doesn't have to be a shitty job, because this is another bad programming. I get small money to do something, therefore it's a shitty job. But maybe if I wasn't getting small money and I had a lovely house, maybe I'd feel differently about doing that job, for example. So, I mean, it's, I think that our perception of work, our value, how we perceive the value of work, is completely skewed. That some people, we know that like some people work in a bank and they get like $1 million a year, and people sweep the roads and they get whatever, a tiny fraction of that. And we say one guy got a shitty job, one guy doing that, but I don't know, it's the guy sweeping the roads can be every bit happier than the guy with the $1 million and driving a Jaguar. I mean, there's nothing to say like that. I've seen road sweepers who are incredibly happy, and I'm wondering how the hell these guys so happy. So,
and I think even, I sometimes I would like to have the diversity, maybe drive a cab sometimes, or it's not that there's a lot of practical jobs. I think people with high, I have some high achieving friends, but I think they would love to, for example, be a cook, or what's it called, be a chef, or be they would love to have this additional thing going on. Only now it's you have to do your job 80 hours. But if you would tell them you could do one day of being a chef somewhere, I'm not sure they would say yes.
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah, and of course, one of the problems of shitty jobs is that you have to do the same thing every day. You have to flip burgers all day, every day, over and over and over again. And of course, that makes the job more shitty, because you just got to do the same thing all the time. But as you say, if you have diversity where you can literally pick your job. You say, okay, have a list of jobs that need to be done in the community this month. Oh, I don't like the look of this one. I like the look of this one. And you pick the job you like. I mean, of course, it's you can't really force people to do that sort of thing. It has to be kind of in a different mindset altogether, where people really literally want to get out there and want to do it. And in my experience of the people that I know, I mean, I can't think of anyone actually that I know who would just resolutely lie in bed and say, right, I'm not getting up, I'm not doing anything. I don't have to work, so I'm just going to not do anything. I don't know anyone like that. I'm sure there are people like that. But everyone wants to be productive to a large degree. No one wants to be in a prison job doing the same crap every day. But everyone wants to be productive in some way. We want to be valued. This is part of our social nature, is that we want to be respected and valued by the people around us. We literally live for that, and this is why things like Instagram and Facebook are so popular, because we crave sort of community admiration, whatever, or respect from the community. So this means that we are certainly social. So we have to be being social means also being productive, So we all want to get out there and do things. So I'm optimistic. I think it's going to take some time, but I'm hopeful that the new site that we're going to be launching soon, it's basically like we're redoing the Free Worlder site, but you can get on and have a look at the Free Worlder site there now. But we're rebranding it into into a more like a retail looking site, shall we say? But obviously still be free goods and services. So that's what we're looking for. And there are other organizations who are also calling for the same, I think, the sort of thing that I'm calling for. They call it a resource-based economy. I call it open access economy. I mean, it's basically the same for all intents and purposes. So probably overall, globally, there's maybe like several millions of people who are already kind of thinking like they're far down this train of thought and this is going to happen, you know. And it's a bit disappointing to see the likes of Extinction Rebellion. They're doing a lot of these protests in Europe and in England especially, and they don't seem to be taking on board this kind of post-market idea, you know. Whereas, I mean, for me, it's so blindingly obvious that all the climate problems, all the environmental problems is a direct result of this capitalistic, individualistic, materialistic system, which is chewing up our planet. Anyway, that's enough rant for me, I think, on that.
We could go on and on because I could go maybe for next time. And for now, because you all also have something to offer, so share about the gift you have for the audience.
Oh yeah, the book I mentioned, Into the Open Economy. I don't know if you can see that because I don't have my camera on. This is basically, it's a book that I wrote 3 years ago or something like that. It's free to download. You can buy the paperback at cost price from Amazon. Just look it up Into the Open Economy. But it's free to download from Amazon. You can download it on Kindle, and you can also download it from the Free World Charter website. The link I sent you the link, so you should have the link there. And it's a very short book. It's a very short book. It's almost like a ladybird book. Even the text is quite big. So it's like. It's trying to keep the idea really super simple because I want everyone to be able to be exposed to these ideas, different way of doing things without bamboozling them with economic jargon or that sort of. It's a very, very simple book, very, very clearly written. And we've had maybe 10 or 20,000 downloads of it. So lots of people are reading it. So it's really, really good. If you like that book, there's another book that I wrote. This is a novel that I mentioned. This is called F-Day, which is basically about it's like a fictional enactment of how a moneyless world could come about. That's not free, unfortunately, but the other one is, and hopefully people will download that into the Open Economy. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on it. We've also created a wiki site based around that idea called Open Access Economy, so people can Google that. And we're making the idea open source because, you know, these obviously the ideas that I'm having are not just my ideas anyway. I mean, I'm stealing from loads of people here, you know, to come up with these ideas. And of course, my ideas are not absolute. You know, other people need to contribute and give their ideas as well. So this is why we're creating a wiki, because we want lots of people to contribute. So it's kind of like a Wikipedia type site with based around how would a moneyless society work and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's all fun. That keeps me busy.
Thank you so much, because what I really love about the subject is it is kind of triggering and it is awakening in a grander scale. And I really love this, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sigrid. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And I want to thank the audience. Thank you, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Bye.